Good morning to everyone. This is Mike Anderson, and I think we got Ken Lane here as well. And
yes, sir.
The topic today is how to run a successful hackathon for your open APIs. We're going to let Ken fill us in here on this one. I'm really excited. I got a chance to look at, talk to Ken a little bit and look at his outline. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk through this stuff, so I'm really looking forward to it. Let me just tell you guys right up front, add your questions in the Q&A as we're going along, so if things come up, feel free to type them in. If you want to, you can use Twitter, you can use Facebook. There are several other things, but you can type them right in here if you want, and then we'll catch up to them towards the end there. So, yep, this is going to be recorded, so if you're time shifting, you may not be able to ask questions live because you're listening to this later, but we'll definitely have this available later on if you need to leave early or something like that. So with that, I think what we're going to do is turn this right on over to Ken and let him start out talking about setting up hackathons.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, Mike. All righty. So let me get. Are my slide decks in here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think if you go to the top tab there.
There we are. Sorry about that. All right, here we are. So I wanted to talk about how to run a successful hackathon today. This is based on my experience attending probably over 100 hackathons, helping organize probably quite a few less than that, probably about 10 or 20, and actually putting on a few of them myself. And they can be stressful, but they're actually a pretty enjoyable thing if done right. And that's what I want to help people understand today is how to successfully run your hackathon. So let's start with the basics, because you'd be surprised when I start talking hackathons out there in the world what kind of response you get from people, and usually it's a pretty negative one. So I want to start with what a hackathon is not. It's not about illegal activity, cracking systems, penetrating networks, getting a bunch of young kids together to write viruses or Trojans or do anything negative. A hack, and this is my definition, but it is a commonly held one. A hack is a quick and dirty technical solution to a problem. It's not fancy, it's not quick, but it is creative. And it's usually something that we can get done within a couple days or a couple hours. So what is a hackathon? So it's taking that idea of what a hack is, a quick and dirty solution to a problem, and spending usually a day or up to 3 days in a space trying to get together with a bunch of people and solve problems with technical solutions. And so it's some people don't like the word hackathon. Some people prefer using hack day or hack fest, or eliminating the word hack entirely and using code fest or codeathon. But really, they're usually about 8 to 56 hours long. People are focusing on projects or building some sort of startup, and there's sponsors involved usually. They come together to help pay for the food and make things happen. And there's winners and there's prizes at the end of the weekend. These are a lot of the common characteristics of hackathons. So where did it get its origins? I think everyone knows that hackathons were kind of born out of Silicon Valley. They really go back to late 1999, and it was the developers at OpenBSD and the marketing team of Sun Microsystems. And at a cryptographic developers event in Calgary in 1999, they put together the word hack and the word marathon and came up with the word hackathon. And ever since then, that word's been used by kind of Silicon Valley crowds to describe this kind of marathon event that developers are going to get together and do something geeky together. So what is the purpose of a hackathon? There's a lot of reasons for having a hackathon, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there of what you get done, what you can get done, and what hackathons are for and what value they bring. But really, the first and foremost, hackathon is a marketing vehicle. It's a vehicle for the company or the platform throwing it, the sponsors, and ultimately the developers and attendees too, to market their skills and their talents. So secondarily, hackathons also are a talent acquisition platform. They're a way to see developers in action and identify talent that either you can acquire or bring into your company, or just put to good use when it comes to your platform. And beyond that, there's a lot of reasons for having them, but some of the good ones for having a hackathon is exposure for your platform if you're trying to get the word out there about your API, your tools, or whatever, generating new ideas around your platform, building teams, getting people to come to them and either from partner companies or other companies and form teams. They're networking events also, allowing people to come together and network and meet each other around a specific topic or theme. And a lot of innovation occurs at hackathons. You can really, you may not get a finished product by the end of the weekend, but you can really work on some tough problems and innovate and abstract around those problems. And hopefully if you throw enough hackathons, you can, move a kind of product forward in different iterations by abstracting and building layers on it, and ultimately create some sort of kind of research and development arm of your company or your platform or team or whatever entity you're pulling together to throw a hackathon. So what types of hackathons are there? There's a lot of them out there. I've been tracking on them this year. There's an average of usually about 75 to 100 a month around the world. And they're focused on anything from, focusing on a specific platform. Been to a lot of Facebook hackathons. So they'll focus on just building things around Facebook. But you also see them popping up in different industries and verticals. You're seeing the Clean Web Hackathon, the Water Hackathon. You're seeing just specifically mobile ones, specifically retail. And so they're really starting to grow beyond just general technical hackathons. And one of the most, popular themes for hackathons is the startup or business. And I think that, really was popularized by Startup Weekend, who took the kind of Silicon Valley model of, hey, let's build a viable business by the end of the weekend. So that's really, captured people's imaginations and has gone a long way. And then another new type of hackathon that I see popping up is data visualization. In this era of big data, we're actually seeing where the problem trying to be solved at these events is making sense out of big data. And I think that's one you're going to see a lot more of. And then I'm also seeing the kind of consumerization of IT, where it's not actually a lot of programmers. There's programmers there, but really it's about using existing software as a service tools and platform as a service tools and helping people who are non-programmers solve problems using those technologies. And then there's also a growing movement for international hackathons and people of kind of a international exchange program, people, spreading the Silicon Valley message on a global level and bringing ideas from other countries into the U.S. as well. And then there's also this, beyond the open hackathon, you're seeing a lot more internal hackathons where companies themselves are using the hackathon model to build and innovate within their company, and it's not necessarily open to the public. But companies like Zappos and LinkedIn and other places have found value in throwing internal hackathons, but then also sometimes opening those up externally and bringing in people from outside to fraternize and network with their employees. So what role does the hackathon play in developer engagement? Because this is really the critical piece. This is why we're inviting developers here. And developers are kind of a unique beast. They like to solve problems. So what we're doing with hackathons is really, tapping into the kind of developer mindset by putting problems on the table and encouraging and, challenging them to solve those. And that's what developers like. They like coming to an environment where, they're going to be needed and wanted, and they're actually going to be challenged. And if you got something that they're going to learn about, something new, and educate them, they like that as well. It keeps them engaged. And if you can provide a networking environment, because as you can tell, or, pop culture talks about, developers don't have the best social skills sometimes. So if you can create a networking, social and collaborative environment that they can hang out in and meet other developers, I think your event's gonna be successful because you're engaging in developers and you're creating a positive environment for them. And all of that together really creates a loyal developer. So if you're holding your event to bring in new customers or new developers to your platform, it's a great way to really build loyalty with developers, because if it's a positive experience and engages them in the right way, they're on board. So I always challenge people when they want to throw a hackathon. The first thing I ask them is, well, what's your objective for holding a hackathon? Because a lot of them just hear the startup weekend model and then they run with that. But, I really challenge people to ask the question of, what is your objective for having the hackathon? What is your ultimate goal? What are you promising your sponsors, and who do you think you can attract to this? And then, really, picture the weekend and try to understand, well, what do you want to have done by the end of the weekend? And what do you want people to leave the event with, or having done, or feeling like? Because that's really going to feed into whether your event's successful or not. And understanding how you're going to measure that success when you walk away at that weekend and after you spent, 10, 15, 20 grand on the event, how are you going to measure success for your company? How are you going to report this back to your bosses and let them know that it was successful? So part of this event planning process, now that you kind of know how you're going to, why you want to have a hackathon, you should really kind of throw up a framework, because you can really do it any way you want. You don't have to adhere to the startup weekend model that's been put out there. It's just one framework for your hackathon. But there's a lot of common elements to a hackathon that you can use. You just really should set up the framework to begin with. So, usually they're 8, 24, 48, or 56 hours. Usually starts with, the event kicks off with some sort of overview of the event by the organizer. They give time for the sponsors to present their platform and their wares. And then sometimes they'll actually break off into workshops from the sponsors, either that coincides with the hacking or it's a separate event entirely. So those are the questions you want to ask yourself, is whether you want to have those kind of workshops. And then how the whole pitch process works can vary. You ask individuals to pitch their ideas sometimes. Sometimes people just go right to work. Sometimes you can actually have people vote on ideas, because you'll have too many ideas for the event, and you need the team leads to actually sell their ideas and form teams. And then you got to actually figure out whether you want people to stay overnight, because depending on your audience, staying overnight might not be an option, or depending on the facility, it might not be. So you really want to ask those questions. Do teams want to stay overnight and hack 24/7? And then as you're wrapping up the weekend, there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. How your teams will present their projects, whether you have judges or not, and whether judges can ask questions, judges need to deliberate around the projects, and then ultimately how you're going to announce the winners, and whether you're going to have a kind of networking after party. So these are just some of the common elements of a hackathon that you can pick and choose from as you're setting up a framework, but really kind of lay it out start to finish, as you see how it should work ahead of time. So you really got to also ask who you want to attend your hackathon, because if you don't put any thought into this, the usual crowd of young boys are going to show up. So you really want to make sure that your marketing materials speak to a wider audience, and think about who you want to attend your hackathon. And all the way starting at the top from your sponsors, you got to make sure you get some mentors there, people who are going to be able to go lead and actually provide advice and direction for people. And then you really want business and marketing folks there. You don't want it all developers. You need people who can help look towards the business side of things and help developers understand how to sell and market and package up their products. And then you're also going to want some UX and UI and kind of interface folks that can help make things look good and help the teams create a product that they can really get up and sell. And then, of course, developers, but you got to also think about the press, who you want there as judges. If it's a startup-oriented, you want to think about, VCs and any angels that you can get there. Think about, the age range, whether you want, students or older folks there, or a mix. And then think about, race and gender. A lot of hackathons don't put much thought into race or gender, and kind of making sure they have a diverse set of of people at the event. And the more diverse of an audience you can bring to the event, the more successful it's going to be, and ultimately the more positive of an event it's going to be, in my experience. So I really recommend thinking about, putting some thought ahead of time into who you want to sell your event to. And then, put some thought into, what you're going to offer, because this really, helps set the tone for the event and incentivizes who's going to show up and whether they're going to hang out, what kind of work they're going to do. Come up with the first or second or third prize. Sometimes sponsors will do secondary prizes that they offer. My recommendation is don't make it too big of a prize. Don't make it too small, because some of the larger prizes tend to be really aggressive and intense events, and it can really push out a lot of attendees and make them feel unwelcome. They really want to keep it sensible, in my opinion. But also, make sure there's a lot of other smaller items that everyone gets to go home with stuff. T-shirts, hoodies, stickers, any kind of swag that's going to appeal to developers. And then finding the right facility for your hackathon is critical. This is something that I think a lot of event planners don't put much thought into. But look at schools and universities, and look at conference centers. Try to find existing technology companies, because they tend to be very, hacker friendly already to begin with. And, they should have some sort of large gathering central space and smaller breakout areas, rooms, meeting areas that people can go to when they're working and hacking. I think this is one thing that you're going to see libraries evolve to provide more potential space, but that's not in all communities. And then try to figure out whether you're going to be sleeping overnight, because the facility is really going to matter, whether people can roll out a sleeping bag and actually spend the night. Think about the security and access of the facility during the event, because that's going to be key, people coming and going, how that works. And then hopefully you can find a place that's got, some ready-to-go equipment, internet projectors, tables, refrigerators, things that you're going to need to keep the hackathon going through the weekend, rather than having to rent and bring those items in. And then depending on whether you need help paying for your event or not, you may not need sponsors, but sponsors are a pretty common part of hackathons. And look to your existing company partners to step in and help here, but also look at the sponsors who are sponsoring other events. That's why I got Twilio, SendGrid, and Amazon Web Services here, because you pretty much see them sponsoring every event, and there's other providers like that. So reach out to them. Make sure to have some sort of formal kit for your sponsorship package that you can send out, so it's not something you have to put together each time, and people can download that off your site. And then figure out for your sponsors, whether they're going to present, whether they're going to do a workshop, whether they're going to judge, and kind of come up with some sort of framework for your sponsors. And then figure out, what else they can contribute, because not all of them are going to actually be there to present. A lot of them can provide swag, tools or cloud services that can be used. I mean, Amazon Web Services rarely shows up for their events. They just make sure everyone can use Amazon Cloud Services for building their projects. So there's other ways to get sponsors involved rather than just being there. And then, consider some marketing aspects for your hackathon. Make sure and put some thoughts into imaging and graphics so you can, brand it and it's unique. Put up a website, reach out to the mainstream press. Make sure and print some posters and materials and T-shirts and swag. And make sure, when you're putting together your T-shirt order, try to, think about who your target audience is, and don't just order all men's T-shirts. Come up with, get some T-shirts for the ladies, and come up with other swag that's going to be appealing to the wide and diverse audience that you've brought to your event. And then also make sure and take photos and videos throughout the event. If you have the budget, live stream it, videotape as much of it as you can. I've seen hackathons where they bring in film crews and make documentaries. So really think about the photos and video aspects of your event. So one of the biggest questions I get from people is, how do you attract participants? Because developers are kind of an interesting crew, and there's a lot of hackathons out there. So really I recommend, if you can, piggyback that on an existing conference or event where people are already going to be. So we're talking existing developer conferences. You know, bring in an existing network partner or organizer, someone that, you know, has access to a large group of developers already. Take advantage of the online social networks. You know, really, hopefully you already have some street credit on Reddit or Hacker News, but take advantage of those as well as the offline groups like Meetup and other local developer groups, you know, PHP groups, Java work user groups, stuff like that. And then really reach out to the blogosphere and get them to cover your event. And developers are going to hear about it if it's in their area. And then one of the most important pieces of a hackathon is setting up a proper communications platform. I see many events that don't put together a unique hashtag for the event. Make sure and put up a hashtag, have a Twitter account, have all of the proper social media accounts, Facebook, LinkedIn, set up a YouTube channel, use Eventbrite. Eventbrite is the best event marketing tool out there. Don't neglect using Eventbrite. It's got all the tools you're going to need to communicate with your users and get the word out. Make sure that your developers publish code to GitHub so that the code and projects can live on beyond the event, and then publish all your all your photos to your favorite photo sharing site like Flickr. So opening day, you know, keep it informal. You know, have lots of food and drinks, allow people to socialize, and make sure and give the sponsors the spotlight as well as the developers. Kick things off right and set the right tone. And then while you're on site throughout the weekend, make sure to show up early every day, be available, mentor and socialize, because, you know, you're going to really set the tone for if you're there. And if you as an event organizer or entity is not around, not found, it's not going to be your event. So make sure and be available. Feed people, provide lots of drink, lots of snacks. Be the first one there and then the first one out or the last one out of the door at the end of the day. And then for wrapping it up, you know, make sure and make it as memorable as possible. You know, wrap it up in a good way that makes sure the winners feel like winners, and let them know what's next. You know, and let all the participants know what's next, what comes after this. If you're doing future events, if there's anything else they can get involved in, and then once you've wrapped it up, you know, really write down your thoughts on what happened. Because if you're going to do this again, you really want to make sure and capture those, because, you know, having a lot of event planning experience, those memories go away pretty fast. So identify what went right, what went wrong, and then figure out how to tell stories around the event in a meaningful way. Hopefully you have a blog or some sort of social media outlet, you know, that you can articulate, you know, and tell people what went right, what went wrong, and hopefully you can set the tone for the next event in a different way. And then, you know, one big thing, you know, that I always do at the events is take leftover food, make sure and feed someone, you know, take it down to the community center and try to figure out a way to make sure your food gets used, because you will have leftover food. Hopefully you brought way too much food and kept everyone fat and fed over the weekend. And then, you know, I always wrap up a hackathon with having a beer, and I got a picture of my favorite beer, Neat Coffee, on there, because after you're done planning an event and being up for 48 hours, you're probably going to need a good beer. So with all of that, where are hackathons going? You're really going to see more hackathons. They're growing in number, and they're growing into new verticals. Like I said, you're going to see them in entirely new verticals. Beyond green energy and the environment, you're going to see them in healthcare. I'm seeing them in law. I'm seeing them in public planning. So you're going to see them enter into a lot of new verticals that you haven't seen. Physical, you're going to see a lot more events be about physical hacking. So robotics, electronics, appliances, devices, sensors. These are all areas that 3D printing. You're going to see a lot more hacking on physical things rather than virtual things. And then you're going to see the internal hackathon really keep growing as a viable tool for companies to innovate internally inside the firewall. And then internationally, I think, you know, this model, even though we're seeing a little fatigue, hackathon fatigue in the U.S., meaning people are kind of getting tired of them a little bit because you go to a lot of them. I think internationally, you're gonna see a lot of renewed energy and people who really, you know, want to live the Silicon Valley dream, and by holding hackathons. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully, you know, some tidbits in there that help you understand how to run a successful hackathon. and kind of set the tone right. And, you know, I think that's the biggest part. The hackathons that I run, and I was the ultimate dictator, you know, I was able to set a tone that, you know, made it really successful for my company. And I hope you can do the same.
All right. Excellent, Ken. That's fantastic. Actually, we're already getting a bunch of questions in, and I've got a few questions of my own. I've got a couple of slides, but before I do my slides, I wanted to just ask you just a couple of things. I think one of the things that I noticed as you're going through this is that so much of this seems to have a social or a collaborative aspect to it, whether it's the actual event itself or the media or the way you even organize it or getting involved with local bits. Is that something that, I mean, it seems to be something that's very unique. And is that something that you find is hard to do, find like people easy to pick up on, easy to catch, or is that something that's kind of a challenge when you're starting these things out?
Well, I think that's one of the most successful aspects of hackathons, and why, you know, not that online or virtual hackathons or contests don't work, but really that's one of the important successful components of a physical hackathon. And really, I think it's one of the successful components of education and learning in general is people helping people, working together to learn new things and share ideas that you're never going to be able to replace with technology. So people coming together and being able to rub elbows, meet each other, talk, and share ideas is super critical, and that's one of the underlying successful components of a hackathon that gets overlooked and missed. And I think that's one of the things that a large prize will flatten collaboration and innovation really quick, because you have existing teams come and all work together for a big prize, and they know what they're going to do. And so there's not a lot of collaboration. There's not a lot of people working together. So you have to work at it to set that tone.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. That thing about prizes can kind of flatten that collaborative aspect. So I think that's a really, really good point. So we've got a bunch of questions. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the API itself, a little bit about making sure that API is up and ready and rocking for your event. So I'm going to go through just a little bit of stuff here, and then we're going to start working on your questions and carry on. So let me just go ahead and talk a little bit about things that I focus on. As the principal API architect for Layer 7, my job really is to help people create great APIs in all aspects, whether it's the design of them, the deployment, the management, and helping them find out how to get great adoption and great participation. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things, because a lot of this sort of ties in with being prepared. A lot of the things that Ken said is know your goals, have a good plan, be ready with logistics, and the API itself is a big part of that too. So let me just say, you know, if you got bored and had to get up, the one thing that I want to really give to everybody is this notion that good design of an API gets people in the door, gets people excited, gets people started. But it's good management, good access, good security, all those other things that really keeps them coming back. We all know sort of flash in the pan kind of experiences where it seems really good but doesn't seem to go well in the end. So it's really both. It's a good design and good management that I think is really key. And I don't hear people talking a lot about API design yet, but as we get more and more competition, it's going to be more and more critical. For example, I read somewhere just recently, I think it was probably on Programmable Web, there are 73 commerce APIs that are registered at Programmable Web. We don't need 73. We probably need a half a dozen really good ones. As we get more and more of these APIs, design is going to be really critical. Because really, bad design stifles adoption. If it's really hard, if it's really complicated, if it's really clunky, word gets out really fast. And people say, you know, don't use Mike's thing. It's really complicated. I would use somebody else's instead. And, of course, you know, this goes along with any kind of design of UI or product or anything, that bad design reflects poorly on your brand as a whole. Even if it's just a misstep. We all know cases where somebody kind of messed up and it really kind of colors everyone else's experience. It's hard to come back sometimes. And then this is one that I always recognize. bad design just plain hurts. I mean, all of us, we've all worked on projects where, man, this is just really clunky, or I really, really wish it wasn't this way. You multiply that by hundreds, possibly thousands of devs who are trying to use your stuff, and that can really, it really kind of inflicts pain. So when people ask me about this, they say, well, what's good API design? What are the rules? I fall back on a guy by the name of Joshua Block, who's at Google. I can't remember if Joshua is heading up the Dart language or the Go language or both of them, but he's a really, really high-powered designer. And although these things that he talks about here are mostly for designing internal APIs, language APIs, a lot of this works as well for working on web APIs as well. For some reason, my screen stopped working here. Give me a second. I'm sorry about this. There we go. So the first thing is we need to make it easy to learn, easy to start. It shouldn't be a real pain to get going. Easy to use, even without documentation. It should be relatively straightforward, intuitive. We all know what these things kind of mean. Here's one I really like, hard to misuse. It ought to be really hard for me to delete all my data off of my remote web server. It should be something that works well and is forgiving if I kind of screw up. If it turns out I got to write really crazy code to use your API, it's not going to be a lot of fun, and it's not going to be easy to maintain. I'm going to get grumpy. I love this one, sufficiently powerful. A lot of times I see people trying to design APIs that are going to solve the world's problems. They're like building the Hadron Collider of APIs. You don't really need that. You just need one that solves the problem sufficiently. It may not do everything everybody wants, but it does it sufficiently well. Easy to extend is one of the hardest aspects of good API design. Making it easy to add things in the future, to modify things without breaking people, and to make it possible for clients to take advantage of new things down the road. This takes a lot of effort, but it's really, really important. And another big one that Joshua points out is make sure your design is appropriate to your audience. If you've got an audience of people who are primarily mathematicians, you might design the same API differently than if you're aiming it for a bunch of people who are doctors or lawyers, right? So you need to put it in the language that makes sense to them and that works for the kinds of jobs they do. So even a file system, you just have a file API, it might be different for doctors than lawyers. You might use different names, like that. So aside from just creating a good API that's solid, dependable, and easy to use, there's some other things that I think are really, really important. In the big picture, you need to be agile with your API. Things will change over time. APIs will last a long time. You need to create a platform that makes it easier for you to modify and change, listen to feedback, the feedback that you get from these hackathons, and change things down the line. Another one that I see very common is don't over-geek or under-design. I see a lot of people basically write APIs that expose, for example, their entire data model to the world. That's a terrible idea. That's way under-designed and way over-geeked. Nobody really cares about your data model. What they care about is getting things done. So creating an API that uses your data model is fine, but exposing it directly is usually a very bad idea. And I mentioned this earlier, great APIs grow over time and they never die. Stuff that goes out on the web doesn't go away. So it's really important that you think about that ahead of time. It's actually very, very easy to build APIs that will last a long time. It also turns out to be incredibly easy to build one that you can't sustain or you can't hold up or get way too complicated way too fast. So it takes some time to think through the way you want this API to behave on the web. And a big thing that I say in this area is that you really have to remember that your API is your product. Even though you might have some other website or some other data product, when you create an API for devs, when you go to these hackathons, what you're doing is your API is now representing you. So it's really important that you think about that and you treat it that way. You test it, market it, A/B test it, all those things that you would normally do with any product. You do that with your API as well. So, but that's really only kind of half the story. The other big story is managing that API or making sure that API is up and running and quality, and secure, and you have all the tools you need to make successes for anybody who uses this API. So it sort of goes along. I mean, it's a pretty simple statement. If it's too hard to get started with your API, too hard to get a key, I've got to send an email and wait 3 days until somebody comes home from vacation and sends me a key back. If it's too hard to keep up, if you keep changing this thing week after week, it's one thing to be agile. It's another thing to be just like all over the map, right? You want to be consistent in most times. And finally, if there's any hint at all of the system is buggy or flaky or doesn't work as expected, people are basically going to get really upset. I see this all the time. Good intentions start out, but you sort of make a promise as soon as you put that API out there, and it's really important that you manage it well down the road, because if you fail at these things, most likely they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to pick one of those other 73 commerce APIs or 65 database APIs, or I can't remember. I mean, they were really scary numbers. So really, this becomes sort of a competition ground as well. Your API is important, and keeping it up and running is very important too. So what is good API management? It needs to be easy for devs to register and engage. So think about it. If you're standing there at the hackathon, Ken's got everybody in the room, got everybody excited, and it turns out that it's a real pain for me to get an API key or to get registered to get started, that's going to put a real pall on the hackathon and for anybody else who's working with this stuff. So it's really important that you make it easy to get engaged and stay engaged. And not just for devs, but the API owners themselves. This may be an issue where you're actually selling in to your own organization, right? So somebody has some really important interfaces, and somebody says, well, we should make this an open API. API owners are going to make sure that they can secure what they're doing, that it's not a real complicated process to publish these APIs or to create these public interfaces. So it's really important that you have the right kind of tools in place so that the people who are in charge of that API itself can publish what the devs really need, what they really want. Then finally, you're going to have some kind of portal, you're going to have some kind of interaction space. It needs to be really easy to track what people are doing, update, respond to things, find out exactly what the popular interfaces are, what the really energetic developers are, what the really successful third-party applications using your API are. These are the things that give you the feedback to make your API really, really successful. So, I mean, all the things we talked about, you need to make sure you got good registration tools. You need to make sure you've got really good access control services. There needs to be some kind of sandbox where people can test things out just right in line without having to write a whole lot of code to get started. Needs to be good documentation. You need to have that social engagement forums, IRC channels, a support line, all sorts of possibilities. And you need to be able to use tracking reporting so that everybody knows what's going on. So you can see things coming ahead of time. You can find trends. You might discover that devs are telling you exactly what's exciting about your API, and it may not even be what you originally thought it was. And as soon as you find that out, you should thank them, you should reward them, and you should make that part of your API even better, even stronger. And that's one of the beauties of good management tools, is it lets you find out exactly what's going on with people. So as I mentioned, good API design lets you make things easy to use. You can target to people that really want to make something out of your API, and you offers flexibility in the future so you can grow that. Good management makes it easy for people to get engaged, easy for people to publish their APIs, and easy to track your successes and make more of them in the future. Good management helps everybody be successful. And as I mentioned earlier, the way to look at this is that good APIs are really good products. That's really the key. All right, that's really all I had to talk about. And apparently, I'm not really sure what happened here. Apparently, did you guys see any of my slides or none of them? We'll have to find out here as we go. All right, we'll kind of sort that out.
I think I hogged the ball. I hogged the ball from you there. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, I got to talk about the things that were interesting to me, and we can go ahead and cover those stuff later here. So let's go ahead and talk about questions. Let's get right onto questions here. Okay. So Ken, let's just start out with with one of these questions early on here. So what's the best way to sell this? This is coming from one of the questionnaires, P.W. Carey. What's the best way to sell this concept to C-level suits, or you know, that this is a good program when you're sort of selling inside the company? What's your recommendation there?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it takes some selling. You know, it's easy. I found it's easy to justify budget when it comes to an exhibit floor space because that's something they know. They've been sold and they've seen the ROI on many a time. The ROI on a hackathon is definitely, it's a lot newer, and helping them understand, you know, the importance of developers, how to engage, you know, how you engage with developers is different than how you would engage with probably a lot of your other customers. So really you have to, you know, try to understand who your management is, you know, what their goals are, and really try to find a slot in there that you're going to be able to help, you know, sell that, hey, if you know, whether it's talent acquisition, whether it's just, you know, signing up new meaningful users, hopefully signing up new users isn't just your only metric. You have other, you know, more meaningful metrics, and that a hackathon's going to help you, you know, get those numbers up. And so you really just got to find that way that speaks to your management and in line with the goals and what you've promised them. And hopefully you can find a way that a hackathon is going to meet that.
Yeah, so you really sort of need to know what's important to those people inside your organization, and that's part of your planning, part of your logistics in the event itself, right?
Correct. I mean, it's, but really understanding, you know, that this is a different beast. That, you know, these are people you're not going to reach on the exhibit floor or at the big conference. But these are people that if you do reach, they're going to become advocates and loyal customers of your platform. And so they're going to become your alpha users. So really explaining to your management that spending this quality time collaborating, you know, providing challenges for these developers and bringing them into this environment is really going to help you, you know, build that loyal base of you know, kind of alpha users in your ecosystem that are going to help get the word out.
That's really good. So treating the people who are participating really as sort of giving you a gift as well, which is they're going to tell you early on what this is like and help you build your product.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's that's why these are so successful, and I think people are running with them is because, you know, there's not a lot of other marketing tools that work with developers, or at least proven ones. And I think a hackathon is one kind of proven one. So
that's very good. Okay, here's another question. Who would actually own the rights to the finished products that result from hackathons?
Well, I mean, one, I would say, you know, you're living in a dream if you think, you know, products are going to come out of hackathons, because that's a pretty, you know, common misconception that, you know, you're going to go to a hackathon on Friday, and then by Monday you're going to be able to go back into work and quit your job as a developer because you created the next Facebook. That usually doesn't exist. And then all the way down to, you know, even, you know, products or applications. You're probably not going to have a finished product by the end of this. So really talking about who's going to own it, I think, is a waste of time. But it should be asked, and that's one of the things why I throw in the GitHub piece is you should have your projects publish their code to GitHub, and along with that have some sort of licensing that goes with that. But ideally, you know, there should be some sort of, you know, Creative Commons, some sort of licensing that goes with this. You don't want developers to feel like anything they build there is not going to be there and not be owned by that. I've seen a couple hackathons kind of allude to that in the legalese about these hackathons, and it really blew up negatively and got the wrong kind of press you want for your event. So you really got to be cautious about this and make sure developers retain ownership of their ideas, and you know, find a healthy balance. Hopefully it reflects the balance you already have in your API ecosystem when it comes to code samples and prototypes and things that get built by developers or built internally.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a really good point too. That goes back to the same thing we were talking about before. The idea that, you know, let them own their bits, and you get a lot of things out of the whole experience anyway. So this is really good. Somebody asked, can you speak about internal hackathons? It says, we're planning one for September in Helsinki.
Yeah. I mean, I really recommend that, you know, if you're going to do a hackathon, an internal one's a good place to start because, you know, speaking to kind of your side of the tracks, as far as honing your API, I've seen API owners come to events and bomb in a public open hackathon, and they put their API up and it doesn't work, and you can't register, and it becomes you just set a really bad first impression. So cut your teeth with an internal hackathon. Not only are you going to learn the inner workings of how to put out a hackathon, but you're also going to you know, prove your API and hopefully work out some kinks and some issues. And so having an internal hackathon, I think, is a great way to really test all this out. Plus, it really helps, you know, break your employees and your staff away from what they usually do on a normal day, change their headspace, get them mingling and rubbing elbows and networking with other departments. And it's a great way to really change things up. And hopefully you can have some sort of way that, you know, the code or projects or visualizations that come out of your internal hackathon can actually get routed back into your roadmap. And people can see that, see the value and see the return on doing this, as well as, you know, getting to have fun for a couple days.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's actually a really good point, because it's almost treating the internal. There's a lot of things you can do, like you can treat it as sort of an internal dry run. You can treat it as a way to sort of sell back into the organization, right? And it also then just sets you up for actually doing these publicly. Do you think, has your experience with these internals given you any sense that maybe some of the social aspects are harder internally than they are in a public event, or is that really just kind of a myth?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot of walls to break down, you know, walls that you may not even know exist within your company sometimes, or see because of your management structure or how your departments are structured. So yeah, you're going to have people really cautious about forming new teams, getting out of their elements, trying new things. And so I think you're going to have a bigger challenge with an internal hackathon in getting people to, you know, think differently. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying. You should try different themes, different ways of holding the hackathon. You may, you know, get a win the first time out, but you may have to try different formulas before you find the one that works and evolves or changes your internal structures.
Sure. Okay, well, we're actually running out of time. We didn't get a chance to get to all the questions, but maybe if people continue to post some, we'll be able to continue the conversation online, on Twitter, and some other space. Ken, you really brought up some very, very cool ideas here and some great perspectives on just in general the idea of hackathons, where they come from, how you can use them, and hopefully this gives some people some really cool ideas. So thanks. I'm really sorry we had trouble with my slides. I probably pressed the wrong button somewhere. We'll make sure that the slides are available. We'll post to Twitter and also to our own page. We'll make sure all that stuff is done. So again, I want to say thanks to Ken. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you. Looking forward to doing it again, and hope to see you guys online.
All right, thanks. Look forward to the conversation ongoing online. Feel free to tweet at me, everyone.
Yep. So tweet up everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Mike.